Stephen Jaggers, welcome to the ThoughtRoom.
Yes, finally.
I know. I feel like this in-person meeting, this is the first time we've met, right?
Yeah.
This has been about a year in the making. I think we've had this scheduled a couple times, and our various travel schedules have made us need to reschedule. And so this is a momentous day.
Absolutely. We're right on time. I know we talked about doing this and, we were going to do it online or we were going to meet, and it didn't really work out, but I'm really glad you pushed for the in-person meeting and we both tuned into when felt right for us.
So. Yeah, I'm really stubborn about the in-person thing. And I don't know if you know this, but every single episode of this show, except for one during the peak of COVID, has been in person. And that was something very clear for me when the inspiration for this show started. It was actually in an ayahuasca journey that it was like, start a podcast. And I was like, this is hilarious. This is my ego, right? Telling me to start a podcast. And it came back in 3 different ceremonies. And one of the very clear messages I got was, you need to be in the same space with people. You need to be heart to heart. And so I've done my best to diligently create that and trust that the people who are meant to be on the show can meet me in person and will meet me in this heart field. So thank you.
Absolutely.
For meeting me in this heart field.
Yeah, I love that you kind of claim that boundary and have stuck to that. And that's so much. I mean, we are communicating. The in-person podcasts are always so much better because we are electrical beings.
Completely.
Our nervous systems are communicating so much more than just our words. And there's such a deeper level of communication that comes through and you can feel it,
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to how we first met, was it through your podcast?
I think we had briefly met at Fit for Service maybe 2 years ago in Sedona.
Okay.
And then, I think I had heard about you actually from a good friend of mine. And it might have been through Melissa Stengel at Soltara.
At Soltara.
And
shout out.
Yeah, shout out Melissa. Love her so much. She's such an incredible being.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw that you were doing some stuff with them. And then I was like, oh, who's this girl? And then...
Woman.
Sorry. Who's this goddess?
Who's this goddess? Who's this radiant being? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we ended up meeting at Fit for Service briefly. And then I reached out to you to have you on my podcast.
Yeah. Talk about your podcast. Is that still going or?
Yeah. So it's kind of changing and dancing and has been listening to how it wants to come through. I haven't been doing as many interviews lately because I've been mostly focused on my trainings. And that's required a lot of energy. So the podcast has kind of taken a back seat. But I've been doing some solo casts lately.
Nice.
And just shorter, value and some working through my own stuff. But I'll be putting a lot more energy into that podcast probably in the next couple months and the rest of this year. So it's the Mind Body Mentor podcast for anybody that's interested.
Yep, Mind Body Mentor. And you can get that on Apple, Spotify, anywhere.
Anywhere, yeah.
Sweet. Well, we'll put that in the show notes and people can go check that out. And before we began this podcast, you've already been here for 2.5 hours before we hit record. And do you want to talk a little bit about what you set up for me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll let you talk because that's probably better because you actually went through the experience. But I just led her through a shorter somatic release breath-work session.
Somatic meaning body, right?
Somatic means of the body in relation to the mind. So somatic means of the felt sensation in your body. We are somatic beings. We'll get into that. We can definitely talk more about that.
What's the root word soma? Do you know
It means body.
It means body.
It means of the body. Yeah. So it's the sensations of your body. And We are somatic beings. That is our birthright. How we were born into this world is to feel sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through life and through different filtrations and culture and society. We lose that sensation or sensitivity. Sensitivity is something that I'm very passionate about. And we look at sensitivity in our culture as a weakness. If we say, oh, this person's sensitive, like, oh, be careful,
Right.
be careful around them. But if someone is sensitive, it means they're full of sense. They're full of sensory awareness.
Yeah.
They're full of sensuality. They're full of sensation. And to become sensitive is actually to become more alive. And that's how we're born into this world. Babies are very sensitive. And so most people have become quite numb. And I've talked a lot about this. Numbness is actually an active process within your system. It takes energy from your system to maintain a state of numb, because your natural state is sensitivity. And so when we have different defense systems, nervous system defense systems that are active, that actually numbs a part of us, and that takes energy from us and that energy could be used to, how we want to show up in the world, what we want to create, energy to spend time with our family, our kids, and to utilize to our purpose. And Peter Levine says it's so good is that, people don't necessarily die from trauma, if you will, but it severely diminished our life.
Yeah.
And lots of people call this sort of a living death.
Yeah.
There's so many people out there that they're alive and they're living in this very small spectrum of existence. They're not really feeling the lows, not really feeling the highs. It's a living death. They're walking around alive, but they're actually dead inside.
Right. And a lot of that resonates with me, which, I'm sure we'll get into in a second, but I'm really glad you brought up Peter Levine and his work for anybody who's interested in trauma to definitely look up.
Absolutely.
I'm actually starting, I didn't tell you this, but I'm starting my 3-year somatic experiencing practitioner training in May, wanting to take my own, my embodied experience of what trauma has been in my life and really integrate it, really deepen my understanding of the science of what's happening and be able to use it in my own life and with the clients that I work with to kind of titrate gently into these experiences. And I'm using that language very intentionally because I'm sure, especially in your work, which is breath work, and we'll go into that deeply in a moment, there's a lot of different things going on in this space right now. And trauma is very, very sensitive. It's not something that we want to go into willy-nilly and unconsciously. It can be actually very damaging. And I'm sure my dear friend, Will Reason.
Yeah.
He shared some really amazing stories about when he was first beginning his journey, leading people into their trauma and people having really massive experiences and then realizing actually maybe that's not always the way because you can actually re-traumatize people by bringing them directly back into their trauma. Yeah. So there's an art to this.
There's absolutely an art. And the short definition of trauma is too much, too fast.
Yes. And Will said something too that really landed with me about trauma, which is how we define trauma. It's not necessarily the size or scope of the event. It's whether or not we had the support in all meanings of that word. Were our nervous system supported? Did we have the social support to integrate what happened to us? If we did not, no matter how large or small the trauma was, then it impacts us deeply, like you're saying, and it can create these barriers and blockages and numbness and cutting us off from the deliciousness of life.
Yeah. Trauma is a subjective experience, meaning that a lot of people think that trauma is this like thing that happened to us, right? And trauma isn't what happened to us. It's what happens inside of us based on what happens to us. And that's different for everyone. It's a subjective experience. I mean, you could when I'm working with people, it's important not to have my own sort of judgments. I just worked with someone the other day, and we did a session, and he had this memory of when he was a child that his older brother like took his favorite lollipop away.
Right.
And it was like this caramel apple lollipop, and he had a vivid memory of that. And this man is a CEO running a multi-million-dollar business, and he wants to work through being able to trust his employees and stuff like that, and really wanted to work through scarcity. And so he was brought back to this moment when his older brother like took his thing.
Right.
And that maybe created like a nervous system defense system that started to help, or started to run this perception of this story that people are out to take what he has. And so that's small. I mean, if I was just in my like, normal everyday waking state and not sort of trauma sensitive or trauma informed, I'd be like, dude, it's all fucking lollipop, man.
Right.
Get over it.
And people do that to each other all the time.
People do that too. We downplay the situations that we go through.
And so then there's shame created. And that's a whole nother layer that we have to work through. Is not only did this thing happen, we're ashamed that it affected us.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very sensitive, and especially in breath work, which we'll get into. There's so many different types of breath work out there, but a lot of the times there's so many people doing these breath work sessions out there, and they don't realize that we are taking someone kind of from a physiological state into a state of trauma. And if you're not aware of that, you can re-traumatize someone very easily.
Yeah.
Because on a physiological level, your body is is thinking and is feeling on a physiological level that you are actually going back into a trauma state.
Right.
And so there's a lot of this like, psychedelic DMT breathing, all these different things where people are not trauma informed or trauma sensitive, and you can really fuck people up.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been doing this for how long now?
So I've been a body worker. We can talk a little bit about my background, but neuromuscular therapist, somatic release body worker for about 9 years now. And I kind of made the transition into being a breath worker maybe about 2 years ago, like fully having that understanding. Actually, in 2017, I was exploring with different psychedelics, and that was a huge part of my awakening.
Tell me more.
Yeah, and so I had explored with psilocybin mushrooms and LSD sort of on a recreational level, and they really helped open me up, and I wanted to learn more. So I stumbled across this nonprofit organization called MAPS, and I signed up to work the Psychedelic Science Conference in 2017. And we kind of ran this like healing area for the conference. We had lots of naturopaths and acupuncturists and body workers, and people could come receive those sort of treatments. And there were a lot of people telling me like, hey, you gotta go to this man's workshop. It's a breath work workshop. His name's Stan Groff.
Oh my gosh. No way.
I was like, who's that guy? No, I had heard about him. But they're like, you have to go to this man's session. And I went and did a holotropic breathwork session with him.
Life-changing, I'm sure. I mean, he's the master.
He's the man,
He's the
and
man.
everybody in the breathwork space knows that he's kind of the father of most of these sort of intense breathwork journeys.
His books are amazing.
His books are incredible.
The Cosmic Game is one of my favorite books. It's like a hidden gem, I feel.
I haven't read that one yet.
But a lot of people haven't, and it's been instrumental for me in integrating my plant medicine experiences for sure.
I'm gonna have to go buy that one.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. So in 2017, I ended up doing his session, and I had more release on a somatic level that I ever had from any sort of body work.
So tell me what that looked like. So you're in this workshop.
Yeah. So I'm in this workshop, and I had done, rewinding a little bit. Like I got into body work specifically. I had grown up, my parents were both heavy drug addicts. They were addicted to meth, cocaine, lots of different things. You know, I'm an only child, and I
Wow.
was a very sensitive child, and I could feel even from a young age that there was something wrong. You know, there was something off. I knew that
Yeah.
this wasn't how a family unit was supposed to be.
Right.
And so I had really wanted to help specifically my mother. I just watched her suffer with anxiety and depression. And, you know, they ended up getting off of those hard drugs and creating a new life. We moved to Arizona, and they quickly switched to prescription medications. And I watched her kind of cycle through different prescription medications and still move through the same issues. And, you know, I had always been a very active person, really loved just getting in my body. I played basketball, baseball, all these different sports, and I was always skateboarding outside. And I had realized that, you know, when doing those sort of activities, being in my body, I wasn't necessarily, you're not thinking about the past. You're not thinking about what's going on at home.
Right. You're like
You're
in
not
flow
thinking,
state.
you're not thinking about the future. You're only thinking about what's going on right in the present moment. So I was kind of addicted to those sorts of things, adrenaline junkie, if you will. And then I wanted to study addiction psychology, specifically outside of high school. And so I kind of went down that route. And then I wanted to also study the body. So I kind of started taking some physical therapy classes as well. And I didn't really resonate with either of those learning styles. I didn't really know it at the time, but I'm a very kinesthetic, like experiential learner. I ended up dropping out of both of those and just got a regular job. I was working in corporate America, human resources executive for a microchip company, which was,
Wow.
I'm glad I did that because I
So
hated,
different than what you're doing
so
now.
different. Yeah, I hated the corporate world, and I'm thankful I went into it because I realized that it just was not for me.
Meanwhile, this morning you're like wiping my tears off my face as I'm having this full-on experience.
I never would have thought that I would that I'd be doing this sort of work, but I ended up finding a holistic school that really taught. It was almost like a Hogwarts school. You know, it was like
what's that called?
It's called Southwest Institute of Healing Arts. It's in Tempe, Arizona, and I wanted to go back to school for body work because I really I loved working with the body, and I knew that I could work with people. I didn't need anything else besides myself and another person. And I knew I wanted to help people in some sort of capacity. But I'm thankful I went there because they have both Western and Eastern sort of ideologies behind body work.
Yeah.
And, you know, I learned polarity therapy, cranial sacral therapy, a little bit of Reiki, but I didn't really resonate with that as much. And then I studied, you know, anatomy and physiology, and I ended up becoming an instructor there. I taught kinesiology there for a few years.
Wow.
And as soon as I got my hands on someone's body, it like everything started to make sense for me, and it started to really ignite that sort of passion.
Yeah.
I ended up teaching kinesiology, and my assistant instructor actually had a degree in kinesiology. I didn't have any degrees, but I knew how to hold a classroom. I knew how to teach. I knew how to make it applicable in the moment. So, you know, fast forward a few years after that, I started working with some psychedelics just recreationally, and then started having some huge, massive awakenings, and then that led me to that MAPS conference and to that session with Stan Groff. And
funny how one thing leads to the next, isn't it?
It leads to the next. And during that session, I started to become aware of a lot of the tension that was in my body. And meanwhile, you know, another thing that led me into body work was when I was 18, I went to the doctor because I was having some spine issues. And I found out that I had some scoliosis, if you will, like right in my thoracic spine, like right in my solar plexus area, which come to find out when I went to that school, and started receiving lots of different body work and understanding, you know, your solar plexus is your fire center. It's ruled by your adrenals, and my parents were addicted to stimulants, you know, so that I really feel like they kind of passed that down to me. Yeah. In a way.
Even you jokingly said, "Oh, adrenaline junkie," but it's like if you grow up in a household where people are just doing meth all the time. Yeah. And that's the texture and the air of the home.
Oh, anytime I do any sort of stimulant, my body's like, ooh, it likes it.
It's like in the DNA. Wow.
It's in the genetics, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was, during that session with Stan Groff, I was made very aware of that specifically. I had that sort of realization. And then I had that realization of myself being a body worker. And the realization was that I had actually been a breath worker first, a body worker second.
Huh.
Because anytime you're working on somebody or you're working with somebody, I'd always be working with the breath. If people are holding their breath, I can't take them any further. If people are stuck in a contracted state, they're not breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And so while working on people, I would kind of subconsciously or unconsciously like work with their breath. And so I wanted to study breathing specifically and how that affects the nervous system, and you know, understanding that the nervous system is the chakra system. It's the electrical system of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And your breath, breathing specifically, it's the only body rhythm that we do both consciously and unconsciously.
Yeah.
Like try to stop beating your heart right now.
Right.
You can't do that. You know, that's a body rhythm that is basically unconscious.
Right.
Your breathing, you can do it unconsciously. Like we're going to continue to breathe throughout this podcast. I'm not thinking about it.
Right.
Or we can stop right now and we can actually take a deep breath in.
Isn't that amazing?
It's wild.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it is the bridge between your conscious and your unconscious mind and body.
Yes.
And so you actually have the choice to use it, or you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the choice to use it, you can actually send your system into a different state. It's part of the toggle switches and buttons that we have to control our physiology at any time, control our nervous system.
Yes.
And the nervous system is the electrical system of your body. It controls all of the, you know, the muscular system, the glandular system, the skeletal system. And, you know, I had been working on people's physical bodies for so long and seeing different muscular imbalances and trying to release muscles and all of these different things. But what's actually controlling the muscular system?
Exactly.
It's the nervous system.
Right. Exactly. And thinking about the chakra system, which some people may or may not be familiar with. So you can go into that a little bit more if you would like to, but also how the chakra system is a glandular system.
Exactly.
And each one of these centers, energy centers, if you will, is connected with a different miniature brain, right?
Exactly.
You want to go into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So your chakra system, or you could say, you know, you have different centers within your body, and they're actually called nerve ganglia or nerve plexi. So they're bundles of nerves, and you have these bundles of nerves in the top of your head and your, you know, in your forehead and your throat and, you know, in your heart and your gut. And then obviously in your sexual centers, and then underneath and sort of your perineum as well. And those are kind of the main nerve ganglia that you have. And those are electrical centers. You could call them a fuse, if you will.
Right.
And so when we have different electrical issues, we start to blow fuses, and those control the glands on that electrical line. They control the muscles on that electrical line. They control everything on that electrical line. And so most people think that they have like a muscular issue, but it's really an electrical issue.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. So there are 7 main ones, right? Like this is always debated too, because
I'm not going to debate
there's
this.
different traditions that believe many different things. But traditionally, what we're aware of is there's 7 primary ones within the body that is it the Vedic traditions, or where does this knowledge?
Vedic. Yeah, those are Vedic traditions. The chakra system is a Vedic tradition. There's, you know, TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, that looks at meridians.
That would be like your acupuncturist is using the meridians.
Yeah, your meridian lines. But a lot of those meridian lines, they line up. You know, it's many different cultures have looked and mapped out the electrical system of your body.
Right. And then depending on how galactic and spiritual you want to go, there's also chakras outside of the body as well.
Yeah, I mean, you are an electrical being, and you have an electrical bubble around you.
Right.
You're like a battery. You have a positive pole and a negative pole.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the sort of pulsation of electricity between that up and down your spine. And that you could say is your cerebral spinal fluid. Your cerebral spinal fluid actually has a pulsation. It breathes as well. It has a body rhythm, and that goes up and down your spine and bathes all of the different sutures between your cranial bones and goes down each vertebrae all the way into your sacrum, and it's sort of your the pulsation of electricity within yourself, and that expands through your nervous system, out your body, all the way to this, you could say, this bubble around you. And a lot of the times people call that bubble your aura, if you will. And so,
or your own electromagnetic field.
Your electromagnetic field, your torus, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever vernacular makes you comfortable to actually admit that this is real, then go ahead and use it.
Well, it's important. I've found it's important to be able to explain this in lots of different ways because
absolutely,
as a teacher, everyone digests information differently.
100%.
And so how can I explain this in many different ways for their different digestive systems to be able to digest and absorb and assimilate it?
Completely. And we were talking about Joe Dispenza earlier because I'm getting really excited.
That's gonna be so rad.
In 6 days, I'm flying to Mexico for a 10-day all-inclusive vacation, and we'll be working live in person with Joe Dispenza at his week-long retreat. And so I've been diving deeply into his material for the exact reason that we're talking about here, which is bringing that scientific perspective. It's been interesting in my journey. I feel like I oscillate at sometimes in this journey. I really want the scientific explanations. And then at other times I'm like, that just doesn't matter to me because my embodied experience of this is so palpable that I don't need the science. But I'm really looking forward to being with him and receiving his program because he is so gifted at taking the neuroscience and unpacking it and really bringing it alive for a lot of people, because for many of us who are very cerebral, I don't know anyone like that, definitely not talking about myself, but we can be so stubborn to receive something that is new for us that without having it explained in detail, we will be unwilling to let go or surrender into the experience. So I really love Joe Dispenza for people who are maybe a bit more skeptical of how all of this works. So I know you said that like some of what you do draws off of his work as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's been an incredible inspiration. The way he can just put things into words is phenomenal. I would highly recommend go checking his stuff out. But it's so important to have both the science and the spirituality. We can either measure an experience or we can either be an experience. And it's very hard to do both.
Yeah.
But both are important.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to loop back to two things. One first is the workshop with Stan Groff, and when you said you started to have the biggest release of your life, can you paint a picture in detail for me? If you can go back to that day, I know it was a long time ago, but it sounds like, because you're bringing it up, that it was a pinnacle moment for you. It was a life-changing experience. So for somebody who's listening, who's maybe doesn't even know what a breathwork session entails, can you paint us a picture of the story of that day as best you can?
Yeah. So traditional holotropic breath work is done. It's about a 3-hour long session.
Wow.
And so there was probably 40 or 50 people in the room, and everyone's laying on the ground, breathing deeply in and out through the mouth, loud music playing, and it's continuous breathing. And it's hard on your system. It is very hard on your system, but people start to, I remember hearing around me, there was a guy next to me like yelling and screaming, and so much anger was coming out. And there was another woman next to me. I could just hear her sobbing. And
were you alarmed? Like, did you have judgment of others the first time? Admit it.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, definitely. I was like, holy fuck. Like,
yeah,
there was so many people feeling so
That's
many
intense.
things around me.
Yeah.
Like, and myself as a body worker, I like want to go around and make sure everyone's okay. But I was quickly brought back to like, I need to be in my own experience, and then as soon as I did that, I started to feel a lot of the people around me were making different, tapping into different emotions, and I could feel the amount of pain that people were going through, and it made me feel it in myself. And I can say I'm like an empath, or you could call it just a sensitive person. I'm picking up on a lot of the energy in the room, and it was the first time I really like tapped into a lot of anger.
Yeah.
I'm definitely more of a soft, gentler person, and my parents, I saw a lot of anger, and anger wasn't something that I saw as like a healthy expression whatsoever.
Right.
And so I started feeling like a lot of anger come up in my system towards my parents, and that anger came up and out, and I, was thrashing around and yelling and all of these things. And then underneath that anger was actually really a deep sadness.
Yeah.
You see that a lot with people. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the times there's anger there, like I was angry for my dad for not being able to like come to my sports games or to just like teach me things as a child. And I was just fucking angry about it. But underneath that, I was actually just really sad. I was just sad because I wanted his love, And so there was sadness, and then there was like, and then after that, there was like laughter.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, fuck, if that didn't happen, I probably wouldn't be here experiencing this in the first place. And so why am I making such a big deal about it? And so I went through probably the full spectrum of human emotions, and I felt like I went through a fucking washing machine,
Yeah.
But after that, like I really cleared on a physical level. I allowed myself to feel all of these different things, and it helped. Like I cleared a lot out and released a lot, and I actually became clear mentally.
Yeah.
And when I became clear mentally, I had saw myself as a body worker and what I'm doing right now, and how everything in my life has led me up until this point to help other people. And that, I had been working on a physical level, and I had been helping people align their bodies, but really I had been helping people align their breath and their inspiration,
Yeah.
When we look at inspiration or respiration, to become inspired is to take in the spirit.
Right.
And when you respire through your respiration, with every breath, you respirit. You are respiring.
Yeah.
You're breathing your soul back into your body.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of this in the spiritual community of like ascension and going up and out of the body. But I really believe that it's about respiration. It's about respiring. It's about breathing your soul back into your body so that you can be embodied right here, right now, to the fullest extent of whatever your soul's mission or your purpose in this lifetime, but to be embodied fully here, right now.
Yes.
Living and in your body to the fullest.
I am so glad that you said that. That is so potent and cannot be underscored enough. And definitely in the spiritual communities, I've seen that too. The putting the ascension on a pedestal. And I've gone through periods of this myself where the result has been that I become rather disembodied, and not very connected to life. And that's when you see a lot of spiritual bypassing come in.
It's a form of dissociation.
Yeah.
Even though I just talked to Melissa Stengel a while ago, and we did a podcast, and I was talking about the Shipibo shamans and trauma and stuff like that. And she was like, the Shipibo shamans, they look at, or they call trauma, they call it sustos. And sustos means, in their sort of understanding, is that a part of your soul has left.
Yeah.
Is fragmented.
Yes.
A piece of your soul has left, and a lot of the work that they do is calling those pieces back into the body.
Yeah.
And so that's, we look at that, and from a Western perspective, if that's dissociation.
Yeah.
A part of yourself is leaving.
Yeah.
And you could look at it on an instinctual level or on a nervous system level. We have these fight, flight, freeze responses, and if it's a flight response, but you actually can't leave the situation, Like, say you're a child and something's terrible happening to you, but you can't run away. Your soul, these are protective mechanisms, and these are intelligent responses. And that's the thing. They are not bad. They're here to protect you, and they've kept us alive, and they've kept us safe for thousands of years. But a part of your consciousness or your soul or your psyche or whatever the hell you want to call it, it leaves because it's too intense to experience that in the moment.
There's terror.
But it doesn't, it leaves, and it doesn't just come back. And so a lot of this work, a lot of the trauma work is to actually reclaim and bring a lot of those pieces, those fragmented pieces, back into the body to become embodied here and now.
Beautiful. So let's talk about my experience here. So you were getting into it a little bit. You set up an experience for me, and I'll share in a minute. But if there's anything else you want to preface about how you set that container, or what you said that you normally like to say in the beginning of those sessions, and then we can paint a picture of what went on for me.
Let's paint a picture first, and then I'll describe it after, because there's a lot of subtle nuances.
Okay. Where do we begin? Well, we were here in my open living room on my beautiful fuzzy carpet, and you were inviting me to breathe, and you gave me a specific breath pattern.
Yeah.
Which was?
Well, the first half, it's a little bit more intense, and it's in and out through the mouth.
Right.
And so it's down into your diaphragm, down into the belly, 360 degrees. You know, a lot of people they think about taking belly breaths, but it's not just into the belly. It's your diaphragm, the origin. I can't remember if it's the origin or the attachment of your diaphragm, but it actually connects to your lumbar spine. So it's not just out into the belly, but it's into your back, into your sides.
Right.
And so it's mouth breathing. And a lot of the times people do a lot of mouth breathing, breath work exercises, but breathing through your mouth isn't necessarily healthy for you. But it can be used to take someone kind of into that trauma state that I was talking about.
Because it's activating, right? Because breathing in and out through the nostrils brings your nervous system
into a regulated state. Yeah. So if I was being chased by a tiger, I would be like, oh fuck, I'd be breathing in and out of my mouth like as hard as I can.
Because you're running.
Because I'm fucking running, and I'm running for my life. So we're kind of simulating that state.
Completely.
We're taking someone first back into that sort of trauma state.
And the body starts to remember.
It starts to bring things up. And a lot of the times, so this is somatic release. So we don't have to like go back into the story of whatever happened. We're just taking the body into that state to allow you to release on a somatic level. And what that release could be, it's a lot of the times it's whatever necessary action that you needed to do in the moment of whatever happened. And maybe that's yelling. Maybe that's yelling no, like, or maybe that's yelling fuck off.
Right.
Or maybe it's like crying, yelling, screaming, or maybe it's laughing. Yeah. Maybe it's like,
well, basically all those things happened for me this morning. Yeah. Beautiful. I definitely, well, first of all, I was so grateful for you offering this and holding this space. And I'm also grateful for the amount that I had of work that I've done to be vulnerable, because this is a very vulnerable experience.
It is very vulnerable
to have with someone, and
especially as a woman, and having a male hold space for you. That is something that I see very often. That is on both sides, as a practitioner being a male working with a woman, and as a woman receiving from a male, because there's, in our culture, we're I mean, you can just imagine, but I see, I run trainings for a lot of people with this modality, and so much stuff starts to come up of like, as a male practitioner, do I actually feel safe touching you, or just holding a container for you? And so this work actually gives ourselves the opportunity to repattern that safety between masculine and feminine. And safety is, as far as the container, as far as the setup or whatever, it's it's not so, I mean, obviously you have an incredible space here,
Thank
which is
you.
great. And it's a safe space. It's your house.
Uh-huh.
But safety is the number one modality
Yeah.
over everything.
Yeah.
And safety is something that's communicated from my nervous system to your nervous system on an electrical level.
Yeah.
And your nervous system,
Well
it
put.
either feels safe or it doesn't. There's no in between.
This is true in relationships too.
It's
Like
true
you
in
can't
relationships.
force yourself to open.
You
No matter
can't.
what someone's words are saying, it's safe. Oh, be all of you or whatever. There's
Yeah.
other, like you said, there's other
Mhm.
things we're picking up on that we're like, well, why can't I open? I don't feel
Yeah,
like
that's your mind.
there's something I can't, I don't know.
Your body, your nervous system only tells the truth.
Uh-huh.
It only tells the truth.
Yeah.
And so, I've talked to a lot of people about, having bad experiences with practitioners, whether it's EMDR, whether it's psychedelics, whether it's breath work, whatever it is. Most of the time I ask them, like, did you feel safe with the practitioner?
Right.
And usually those bad experiences where they actually did not feel safe with the practitioner.
Yeah.
So being able to communicate safety and myself feeling safe within my own nervous system, because we're co-regulating.
Yeah.
A lot of this work is just co-regulating. My nervous system is communicating with yours, and it is kind of reminding yours of the intelligence that's moving through your body on a cellular level. And so that's the base of the container. We can talk about the concept of holding space a little bit, because that is a term that's thrown around.
Yeah, I would love to. And I just want to say one more thing about safety that you said, because I think it's really important to highlight again, which is your body knows.
Mm-hmm.
And just because somebody is certified or highly recommended or whatever it may be, if you do not feel safe in a container, for anyone listening who needed this permission, you get up and leave.
You get up and leave right away.
Because it's worth it to leave rather than later be traumatized by your experience and be having that feeling of, I didn't trust myself.
Yeah.
I didn't trust myself. So you just leave and you can have another experience when you haven't, when it's time and your body feels safe. And I cannot underscore that enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I cannot say that enough as well too, is that like you have to have enough sensitivity to know when your body is saying yes or no.
Yeah. What does that look like? Or how might people get in touch with that? What is it like for you?
It's different for everyone. Like I think that we're all born into this world and we have different strengths and weaknesses, you know? And some of us might be more of a visual person. Some of us might be more of a kinesthetic feeling.
Right.
Some of us might be more auditory. You might actually hear, your daemon or your guides or your instincts or whatever you want to call it. But for me, it's a felt sense. And it's in my gut.
Yeah.
And I can feel it's either a full body yes or a full body no.
Yeah.
And that's a muscle.
Yeah.
And that takes practice, because and just like you were saying, is that like you'll know when you actually don't trust your body. Yeah. Because you'll find yourself in a situation that you're like, fuck, I should have trusted myself. And so then your body's like, you can say your body or your soul or whatever, it's like, okay, you think you know better? Like, okay, do this. Mm-hmm. And then you quickly find out that you're like, okay, next time you're going to listen to me.
Yeah, totally. You're reminding me of an experience I had on Monday night, which is for the first time I attended a family constellations group therapy. Are you familiar with family constellations? Yeah, I've heard wacky and wild things about it. And I was like, I'm going to experience this for myself. So again, this is off my very limited experiential understanding of it, but it's a group container. There's a person that's been pre-selected to be constellated that week from the group. And so they're bringing a situation, be it a family dynamic, something in their personality that they're struggling with. And there are roles to play. So these roles could be the personality trait itself. It could be the person being constellated. It could be the members of their family. And all of this is kept a secret.
Yeah.
So you walk into the group And the person who's being constellated then intuitively selects people who are sitting around in the circle and goes up to them and makes eye contact with them and basically initiates them into the center of the circle. And it can start sometimes with just one person or two, and slowly more people are added in, and you have no concept of who you're playing. And it really forces you into this complete somatic, heightened sensory space because you're trying to figure out what's going on. And so there's an interesting mix of feeling the collective energy, your own psychological projections, and it unfolds really quickly. So I actually got selected. And this is a really, really interesting thing. There were a couple of us selected at the beginning, 4 of us to begin with. And there immediately became 2 separate clusters. It was like nothing was said. Everybody just walked into the space, and 2 of us gravitated toward each other, and the other 2 people gravitated toward each other. And there was already a dynamic, and you could feel it in the air. It was like our little group and then their little group. And one of the women in the other little group was kind of hiding behind the other man, and she was almost glaring at me. And this is like 30 seconds into it. And she said something to the man like, I don't trust her. And then I'm standing with this other guy and I'm feeling really safe over here. And I'm not wanting to be near these other people. Again, I have no idea why. It just felt sense. And then they initiate a 5th person to come in. And immediately I go, I feel like you belong over here. And it was just a felt sense that he was supposed to be near our cluster. And then the story started to unfold. And the first man that I was standing with and the second man that I was standing with, I had this impulse like they were supposed to connect. And they ended up having this beautiful impromptu hug. And one of them, the first man started crying in the second man's arms. And we were all having this little, like the 3 of us were really having this experience together and feeling very separate from the other 2 people. And over the course of 45 minutes, this impromptu play essentially unfolds where we know we eventually all have to reconcile and we have to come together. And we're just speaking out the resistances. And one man from our side, is really having a conflict connecting with the man from the other side. The man from our side is really opening his heart and saying, I'm sorry. And he doesn't even know why he's saying I'm sorry, but he's looking at this man saying I'm sorry. And the other man's like, I don't really believe that you're sorry when you're saying these words. And then I felt this impulse inside, like this protective impulse. And I said, he's really speaking from his heart. I really want you to hear what he's saying. And it was just so interesting because we had no context, but the bodies were just doing what the bodies were doing. Later, we come to find out who we were actually playing in the family, and it all played out like impeccably perfectly.
Wow.
And the person who was watching, who was being constellated, was visibly reacting to what was going on because it was just so on par with what his family dynamics were. So it was a really powerful, emotional experience. And it was a
somatic experience.
Very somatic, powerful. Yeah. So back to my session with you. I was feeling really grateful that I had done a level of work that because I know how these things can go.
Yeah.
And I know how stubborn I am. So I was really encouraging myself to be able to let go to any range of experience that was here. And yes, there was resistance that came up. Yes, there was a lot of anger. You talked about anger. I had a lot of anger come up. And like you, that's not really something. I wouldn't call myself an angry person. So that probably gets squirreled away somewhere when things get frustrated. That's that spiritual bypassing too. It's like, okay, that person's just on their journey. Yeah, that pissed me off, but I'm just going to do my work around it. And a lot of times I think I'm too quick to pass over the anger and really not let it be expressed. So I was feeling a lot of anger you were encouraging me to make any sounds that wanted to come out of my body. And there was a lot of frustration noises and yelling. And I was really grateful to have the container that you set, because like you said, the judgment of others and the judgment of ourselves. And here's me being like, well, I don't want to be one of those melodramatic people that, yells a lot and makes it a big experience. And that's something that
it's got to be authentic.
Yeah.
And that's it's interesting because one-on-one sessions are always different than group sessions, because group sessions start to kind of run themselves, because you start to hear other people around you. And as a practitioner, I'm like, how can I orient myself to give your system permission to express?
Yeah.
And so it's a lot harder for me to just kind of, whether it's through words, whether it's through sounds, whether it's through hands-on touch, to help you express. It's a lot harder for me to try to give you permission to express than you actually hearing someone else express. That I have found gives more people permission to express. So one-on-one sessions are a little bit harder. But luckily, I could feel that you felt safe enough to actually go there, and that's a byproduct of you, feeling safe in yourself, and then also me actually holding a pretty tight container as well, and being able to hold space for you. And that term, I keep sitting with this term, holding space, because it's a term.
Talk about it.
It's a term that's thrown around a lot in our personal development community, spiritual community, whatever it is. And words are the carrier of meaning, if you will. Like words mean nothing actually. We actually put the meaning on the word, you know. And then we speak it out, and then it carries this meaning, and then it lands in your body and you digest it. And then but for us to actually be in relationship, for us to actually communicate, to connect, like we actually have to understand the meaning behind the word. And so some of the most powerful work that I've done in coaching and these sort of things is just getting people to define their words.
Yeah.
Especially in relationship. If you've ever been in a relationship and you're like, I want, these are my wants, these are my needs. Okay, well, let's actually define those words.
Yeah.
Because, intimacy could mean one thing to me, and it could mean something completely different to you.
Exactly.
So, holding space in my trainings, it's so important for us to not only understand this mentally, but understand this on a somatic level. And so holding space, my definition is having developed the ability to take in the full capacity of a moment and not being reactive, but being responsible, having the ability to respond. So we'll break that down even further. Having developed the capacity to take in the full experience of whatever's happening in the present moment and not being reactive. So we are a very reactive culture. Reactivity is sort of similar to what I call the fix-it mentality. We live in a world where everybody is trying to fix each other. But when we are trying to fix someone, we're creating the polarity that person is broken.
Yes.
And so in our culture, you have something wrong with you or whatever, you want to be fixed by somebody, you go to the doctor and they're going to try to fix you. And so we live in a very fix-it mentality culture. And this work is the exact opposite, where I am not reactive, like something comes up for you. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm not trying to go over there and tell you, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay.
Right.
Like if we think about someone's feeling something, we immediately want to fix that.
Right.
And we run over there and we say, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. But really what
and we
we're
do
saying,
that because we're uncomfortable.
Because we're uncomfortable.
Right.
And maybe there's other like intentions in there. Maybe it's like, we actually don't want someone to feel this.
But why don't we want someone to feel it?
Why don't we want someone to feel it? Exactly.
Yeah.
So when we're running over there saying, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, what we're actually saying is, no, stop.
Right.
No, stop. And we stop that actual process from happening.
Yes. And we shut them down.
And that process suppresses things.
Yes.
And so that reactivity is what is stopping people's process. And the opposite of reactivity, or the opposite of the fix-it mentality, having to fix people, is being responsible.
Responsive, yeah.
Being responsible, meaning that you have the ability to respond, meaning that you are holding a neutral container. You have no judgments. You have no sort of, you're not throwing your shit into the space.
Right.
You are witness consciousness, just fully taking in the capacity of this moment. And then if something comes up, you have the ability to respond based on your tools, based on your resources, based on giving someone permission to actually go into it.
This is really resonating with me, and what's coming up right now is part of my background is in developmental psychology. So immediately these 3 different parenting styles came up for me. And when you're talking about being reactive, I'm actually thinking about that sort of parenting style that's like helicopter parent, right? Or like maybe a little bit could be an authoritarian parenting style where they're really wanting to dictate what's going on. That's a controller parent. And then the flip side of that is when a child is neglected, right? And there is no response. There is no support. There is nothing. And so this sweet spot in the middle is what you're calling holding space, which is that ability to respond when needed, if needed. And sometimes the responding is just in the presence without being reactive. And this is so critical in relationships too. It's like, do you try to fix your partner, or do you feel unheard by your partner because they're not even responding to what your needs are?
Yeah. And as soon as you start to think that you know what this person needs, you actually have lost it.
Right.
As soon as, I mean, I used to see this in body work. Like people would come in, they got a shoulder issue. Like I'm already thinking in my head, like my protocol.
Totally.
I'm already thinking, okay, I'm going to work subscap. I'm going to flip them over. I'm going to work the front of their neck. And I mean, like while they're telling me what's wrong, like I'm already creating a protocol in my head. I'm already thinking, oh, I know exactly what this person needs.
So,
and as soon as you do that, you've lost it.
So the anecdote is what then? Curiosity, staying curious,
staying in a place, staying present, and presence. Being able to be present is actually having worked through a lot of your own trauma, because trauma is a disorder of not being able to be in the present moment, because the past has frozen into our present moment. The past is not what happened yesterday. It's not what happened last week. It's what stayed.
What's stuck and what's still here now.
It's what stayed from what happened right now. And so, you know, I teach people that to align yourself and to hold space and to be present with someone is you have to honor the innate intelligence of their being on a biological level. And so what that means is that I'm honoring your body, your vessel on a cellular level, the innate intelligence that's moving through it. Like you are digesting your food, you are beating your heart, you are secreting lots of different hormones.
Good job, body.
And like you are doing. There's more intelligence in one of your cells that my rational mind could ever even fucking fathom.
Now I'm blushing, Stephen.
Your body's incredible.
Thank you. It really
You're
is.
doing so good. You know.
I want to tie this into, if you'll go here with me, the dance of the masculine and the feminine, and what it means to be a masculine space holder for the feminine. Can you talk about that a little? This is feeling really prominent for me right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I see this come up. I just held a training this past weekend where it comes up, and I see both sides, you know, women being afraid to work with men being afraid to actually hold space for a woman. And, you know, a lot of this holding space for someone in a sort of healing container, if you will. And first off, you know, being able to be in the present moment, being able to be responsible, honoring the innate intelligence of someone's being. And then like, when you are responsible, you have the ability to respond. you have to have range.
Mm.
And that range is the duality spectrum between masculine and feminine poles. Like I've developed range from doing this sort of work, meaning that if someone is crying, I can tune into that divine feminine mothering energy, and I can just hold them.
Yeah.
And I can just go, because anytime something's coming up for somebody, I have to actually match them.
Yeah.
I have to because I'm co-regulating with them. Me matching someone is creating rapport.
Yeah.
And then I can only take you 10% deeper into any of those sort of expressions.
Yeah.
So I call it the 10% rule, because if I were to go, like if you were yelling and I try to raise you in that yell, like 30%,
Right.
your body's going to shut down.
Yeah.
I can match you and I can create rapport exactly where you're at.
This is so true.
And then I can just raise you just like 10%. And that 10% might be the permission for you to actually fully go into it.
This is such an art too.
It's such an art.
Because we've probably all had experiences where we were starting to express an emotion, maybe caught us off guard in public, or while we were talking about something with a friend, and their response was like a hyper response, was like too encouraging, and then you felt like uncomfortable, and you're like, oh, that was weird. Or someone gives you a hug and they're like over patting you, and you're like not really there yet.
You're not really there yet.
Like, soften me up.
They're breaking rapport.
Exactly. And trust.
And I mean, trust is a byproduct of rapport and your ability to connect with someone and meet them where they're at.
Right.
And so within this work, you have to meet someone where they're at. And if you only have if you're stuck in a hypermasculine state and that's all that you can resonate with, you're not going to be able to hold space for someone that actually needs to be held.
Yeah.
And so being able to flow and fluctuate, when I'm doing group sessions, I might have one person that's crying and then one person that's yelling and then one person that's laughing. And when I go to each person, those how much range do I have and how responsible and how quickly can I shift between each one? And do I have the nervous system sovereignty to be able to shift gears between each person? And that's the full range. That's the embodiment of the divine feminine or the divine masculine.
Yeah, you're making me think of the work of David Data and The Way of the Superior Man. And this was a book that when I led my men's group last year, The Conscious Man, we all studied together. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're in relationship now?
I am right now, yeah.
So I'd love to talk about the way the embodied man shows up with these skills that I'm sure are transferable into relationship. How do you, as the embodied masculine, show up for the feminine partner? What does that look like in practice? And maybe there are some men listening that are really interested in what space holding looks like in relationship.
Yeah. So this is actually where my work is at,
Oh, relationship. Perfect. Well, then we hit on something.
I'm a human,
This is something I love to talk about, and I'm on the other side of this. So maybe we can get into something juicy here that's actually really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first off, I think that most men, we probably, our default setting is more towards the masculine, probably, maybe not. But that masculine state wants to fix the issue.
Yeah.
We have a very rational look at if something's wrong, we want to figure it out. We want to fix it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't go so well with the with the feminine who just the feminine just sometimes they just want to express.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just are feeling something and emotions are just energy in motion. And sometimes they just need to move. They don't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
They just need to be felt, and they just need to give permission to be able to be felt. And something that I've found very helpful in relationship is that when my partner is expressing, and I definitely go into the fix it mentality. Sometimes I definitely go into it. And it depends on my capacity in the moment too, because this is something that I've felt for myself is that I'm going around and I'm holding space for everyone else, but can I actually hold space in my relationship? Do I
Right.
actually have
Huge.
energy left over
Huge.
after that to actually hold space for my partner? And she probably gets the short end of the stick a lot of the times. And so that's been very rough.
Yeah.
But when she's expressing, I'll ask her, is this something that you want my perspective on?
Yeah.
Or is this just something that you want me to listen to?
That's so healthy. And I call that consent.
Yeah.
You know, like asking for consent and making sure that what we're offering is going to be helpful. We all have an idea of what's helpful. One thing that comes to mind is in one of my earlier careers, it was launching Lunar Wild, which is this sacred rite of passage gift for young women, welcoming them into womanhood. And I work with a lot of period products and a lot of menstrual companies. And in that space, someone told me a story about some of the populations that don't have homes and they're living on the streets, and donating certain types of menstrual products to them. For example, a lot of people are like, oh, let's give them eco stuff and like the best cloth pads and like so they don't have to produce more waste. And then the consideration was, well, heard like a very lovely impulse, but when you're living on the street, you don't have often access to any bathrooms at all. Yeah. So you want to have a pad, you want to have a disposable product. So what one group thinks is helpful, without touching in with the other group, you're actually kind of creating more problem. So there's this idea of consent. I love that.
Yeah. And we'll go back to the concept of holding space, is that when you're holding space for someone, you want the energy to come from them outward. And so any sort of my perception, or I think that this might be the answer, that's a direct pressure. That's a direct stressor towards the space. And so when you are holding space, you want the energy to come from them outward. Because sustainable change only happens from the inside out. It doesn't happen from the outside in. I could give her the answer and maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm right. But she has to come to that answer for herself. And that has to come out. And most of the time I'm wrong anyways. But,
well, work in progress. But I think of the feminine like water, right? And the masculine like a variety of containers. And water flows. Water knows itself through the container that it's in, right? Through the clarity of the container. So water can carve itself a riverbed. It can move out into the ocean. It can fall down from the sky. And the feminine is like this constantly shifting and flowing just sea of emotion. And the most effective experiences that I've had with the masculine is when it lets me settle into the safety of the masculine container as I am. And my waters can thrash around as long as I want. You're not trying to carve the path for me. You're not saying your riverbed is this way. You're just being the land that receives me and lets me eventually settle myself anywhere that I want without any shame or blame. Because trust me, guys, we know how irrational at times we're being, and there's so much shame around it because society has taught all of us, men and women included, that we kind of have to be linear and we should be even, and anything else than that is a mental health disorder. But even hormonally speaking, scientifically, you can look at what's going on to women every single month, and they are getting cocktails of hormones that are changing week to week we talked about these glandular systems. They are overriding our brain. Like think about it. It's drugs. It's our own natural drugs.
You can't rationalize it. You can't rationalize it.
And it's embarrassing. Like sometimes when I'm in this pocket of my cycle right now, which is the week before my moon. So this is typically the time that we would call PMS. A lot of women get really emotional during this time. And it's physically felt like frustration, a little bit more anxiety. please never say to your woman, are you PMSing?
Oh, never,
like that's not helpful, even if she is. But I'll say this as a caveat, know your woman's cycle.
Yeah. Oh, know your woman's cycle.
My previous partners, like they've all known and kind of tracked when my cycle. Some of them could intuit when I was getting my cycle, and I would be like, "Oh yeah, you're right." And they're like, "Yeah, I think you're going to start soon." But not because I was being emotional, just because like they knew my body that well. And they like my body changes shapes throughout the month too. And, the breasts will get juicier or whatever. So it's like, wow, can you create that deeper intimacy with your woman's body and her cycles and use that as part of the holding of the sacred container?
Yeah, and knowing that it fluctuates and it flows within that cycle, and just like you said, the metaphor of the water in the container, it's like the masculine, is the question or the statement that you should say is that which way do you want to flow? I'll keep you safe.
Yeah, and also you've got you. I've got you, but you've got you. That's one thing I'm also working on lately is not outsourcing my power.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to know that the masculine walls are there, but I also like to be reminded that like, hey, you're fucking strong.
Yeah.
You've got this and I'm here. I'm here. That's what the sacred masculine is. It's like, I'm here and everything you're experiencing is okay.
Yep.
It's all okay.
Yeah. There's been times within the past, I'd say 6 months-ish, that, I've definitely been very expansive lately, been traveling, been doing a lot of workshops, been working a lot, and I've had quite a bit of growth. And it's been hard on the relationship because it's especially if my lack of ability to sort of hold space a little bit. I think in relationships specifically, I'm really good at holding space for my work, and then in relationship, it's a whole. It will bring up everything.
Tell me more.
Everything, but with my expansion and then holding my space for my partner to be wherever she's at, I've noticed that can be a trick. My expansion can be a trigger for my partner.
Of course.
And so I can see that where, if I'm expanding and she's not, then there's a break in the gap. And then she becomes a little bit harder on herself, which then furthers the gap. And so it starts kind of the self-defeating sort of prophecy. And there's not a lot I can do besides saying that, look, I'm here with you.
Yeah.
I am with you.
Yeah.
And you are a fucking powerful woman.
Yeah.
And only you know that.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
But only you really know that.
Yeah.
And so it's been beautiful to kind of watch her expand and knowing that, we're all in our own time.
Yeah.
We're on our own timelines. Like my expansion might be now, and then maybe you're not expanding right now. You can't be hard on yourself about that. And then, your timing will hit, and maybe I'll be in the opposite seat, and that'll fluctuate and that'll flow.
I mean, and hopefully, because we're not all supposed to be expanding all the time. Think of the breath.
We're not.
That would be like breathing in all the time.
We're not supposed to be in summer all the time. We're supposed to go
everything's
through a winter.
Cyclical. Yeah.
Exactly. So
honoring each other's cycles.
Honoring each other's cycles and attuning to each other's cycles.
Attuning, huge. Yeah. And the last thing I want to say about this and the work of David Data is I think he gives an example in the book, The Way of the Superior Man. He talks about a woman asking her man to kind of like pick up milk on the way home. And he comes home, he like flicks on the TV and she's like, where's the milk? He's like, oh, I forgot. She freaks out. And he's like, I'll just go get her right now. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, I'm grabbing the keys. I'm going to get the milk. She's freaking out. And the man's like, why is she being so irrational? I'll go get the milk. And what David Data says is like, dude, it's not about the milk. Yeah. It was never about the milk.
It's never about the milk.
It's never about the milk. It's not about the thing that you think it is. What is it about? It's about her safety. It's about her safety. It's about your word. Yeah. And so what she needs you to say is she needs you to take responsibility. You know what? I gave you my word I would do this. I am so sorry. will this make this right if I go out and get this right now? She needs you to acknowledge her experience of depending on you and then feeling like, oh shit, I can't trust him now. I have to do everything myself. I'm going to have to. And that's where we, the feminine, often get into our anxious sort of controlling cycles.
And then like they call them like shit tests, you know, where it's like the feminine will start to test you.
Yep.
And you'll be like, why the fuck are they giving me so many issues right now? Because they're testing like, how strong are you? And if you're not, if your word doesn't mean anything, if you're not trustworthy, if you're not embodied, then you're actually not a good
safe father.
You're not a safe father.
Totally.
You're not a good leader. And so
are you going to be able to provide?
And most women aren't even doing that consciously. It's hardwired on a cellular level. It's biological.
And let's just go into that for a second, because I think it's important to state that the reason that we are all still here is because our mothers birthed us, and this has been going on since the beginning of human history. So there's an innate intelligence inside the feminine body that before standard medicine had women biting on sticks, standing up on bricks, and pushing out babies that were our ancestors. So there's something in them saying, hey, I'm not going to have a child with you unless your embodiment is like this. And so we can shit on women for saying they're psychologically manipulative and they're testing, and we all have shadow sides. So I'm not going to discount that absolutely hasn't been a part of my journey, because it has. But underneath it is something that we're biologically primed, and men have their own version of that, which is also like, to what degree are we going to denigrate men for finding the feminine beautiful and sexually appealing, right? And that has a shadow side too. And that's his biological programming of knowing how to choose a great mate with childbearing hips and beautiful genetics and something that resonates with his biochemistry. So we need to have an awareness and cultivate grace with each other and understanding. And like you said, attune to each other to work and to flow and to dance together as masculine and feminine.
Yeah. Probably couldn't have said it any better than that.
Thanks. So there's one more thing that came up that I really wanted to get your take on, which is we hear trauma being thrown around so much in the same way we hear holding space being thrown around and ceremony being thrown around. Where's the line between acknowledging trauma and letting trauma disempower you?
There is, and this is part of my mission, and I think we are being asked this as a culture right now, is that trauma can actually be growth. Trauma and stress, they're very similar. It's not the actual thing that's happening to us. It's what's happening inside of us. It's a trauma response. It's a stress response. And that response is designed to keep us safe and survive. Because it wants us to survive. And Godzi says it so well, is that trauma is a question to the body. And that question answered creates growth, creates a new adaptive pattern. That question not answered creates symptoms. It creates pain, and symptoms will continue to manifest and tell you different things. And so trauma actually is not necessarily a bad thing, which sounds shitty, but trauma actually is the thing that creates growth. It creates evolution. And so trauma is guaranteed, stress is guaranteed in this lifetime. And it's our choice to look at it and find the new adaptive pattern, find the growth in it. You know, it's and we're asking this as a whole right now, as a collective. We're going through something traumatic, and we can actually look at it head on. And we can find a new adaptive pattern to it as a collective, or we can continue to sweep it under the rug. And it'll continue to create symptoms. And we don't, and this is the thing, is that, I'll go back. I want to finish the question too about, your session or whatever, because we only talked about the first half.
Right.
Is that trauma, we need to understand how it moves through us on a somatic level and our own innate processes of how to move it through on an animal level, because we're fucking animals.
Yeah.
And we are somatic beings first, and we are mental beings second. And to be able to actually expand your consciousness, you can't be stuck in a wounded animal state or a wounded nervous system state. And so that first half allows you to, sort of clear stuff out. I've been to a lot of ceremonies, a lot of sessions that are solely around clearing shit out. But you clear shit out, a lot of people's identities are so interwoven with their traumas.
Yeah.
And so that second half of a session is based much on Joe Dispenza's work. Is like, okay, you had this thing happen to you. You allowed it to process through your soma. Now, how do you actually want to feel?
Right.
How do you actually want to show up?
The most important question.
And creating that elevated emotion in your system, because once you've processed it on a somatic level, your body starts to feel a little bit more safe. It literally says when you've released on a somatic level, it says to your being, it's like, okay, I'm not in the presence of a stressor anymore.
Yeah.
The tiger's not there anymore. I've shaken it off, you
Right.
know? And so then you have a little bit more safety in your system to access higher states of emotion. And those higher states of emotion actually start to begin like the process of creating magnetism within yourself, creating an elevated emotion and a clear intention. And that's the process of actually starting to become a conscious creator and adapting new patterns for the evolution of ourselves and our community. We are tribal beings, and we are designed to take care of one another. And a lot of the times, the ways in which we can help each other is from the shit that we've gone through, the traumas that we've gone through, and the things that we've overcome. We've found new adaptive patterns. We would naturally go back to our tribe, we'd go back to our culture, and we would share that with each other.
Yeah.
And that creates growth on a community level. So I don't know if I answered your question completely, but
yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And there's another metaphor that just came to mind. So when you were talking about step 1 was the clearing, and then step 2 was like the intention with bringing in that embodied, elevated emotion. And I was like, oh, it's like first you take your car to a car wash and you get all the dirt off. And then when you're clean and clear, you can wax and polish your vehicle until it sparkles, but you're not going to wax your vehicle when it's dirty because it can't penetrate through. It's not going to get...
It's like a garden. You have to weed it first and then you can plant seeds.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. Yeah. And what you were saying about trauma as evolution, I like that that reframe and the resilience of humankind and how you use the word adaptive too. And when you said stress, and I was not thinking about just, like, oh, work, life stress. I was thinking about stress in the sense of elevated activation within the body, which is like, let's think about situations where pro athletes bring their bodies into what we would label as stress states, and they push themselves to a limit to adapt and achieve higher states in their body, more fine-tuned states. So I love that. It's such a beautiful reframe. And even thinking about the human immune system, right? Yeah. So we bring in a stressor of a flu or a virus or an illness, and the body wants to survive.
It wants to be resilient.
So it starts to adapt.
Exactly.
It starts to change to overcome whatever has come into the system.
Yeah, we repeat it until we complete it. And that's the thing, is that when we overcome something that's traumatic, when we've answered the question, when we've found that new adaptive response, we actually have grown our capacity and we've grown our resilience. And remember that trauma is not the thing that's happening to you. It's what's happening inside of you. And that's different between me and you. You know, maybe I've gone through a lot and I've actually expanded my resilience.
Yeah.
And I've expanded my capacity to where something like that happens again, it doesn't initiate that trauma response.
Mhm.
So, you know, that's the difference between, you know, we want to be sensitive. We want to have sensory awareness. We want to be able to feel all of these different things, but we want to be able to feel it and not attach to it.
Mm.
We want to be able to feel it and not allow it to like bring up defense systems.
Yeah.
And that's our ability to cultivate resilience. So, you know, I'm in this trauma space a lot, and it's a very like, oh, I don't want to trigger you. I don't want to trigger you. But it's like actually, we never waste a trigger, you know, never waste a trigger. And we can bring those things up, obviously in a safe container.
Yeah.
But there's an aspect of it that's like, we need to cultivate more resilience, more capacity to be able to, you know, our culture, we become very weak. We become very fragile.
What do you think about trigger warnings?
What do you mean?
You know, like some things have trigger warnings, like trigger warning, if you've had sexual abuse, you know, you may not want to watch this, or you may not want to, what's your take on all that? Like, is that helpful? Like, that's actually safe and caring and considerate and protective? Or I'm really putting you on the spot with this one.
Yeah.
Or, is that damaging? Is that, I guess
everyone's different, you
and
know?
it depends on the size of the trauma and the support that you have in the current moment.
It depends on this. Life is never static.
So what I'm hearing, though, what I'm taking away from this is that trauma, when there is a level of trained support, rapport, a safe container, a readiness within the person's body, and a slow and safe cadence, trauma can be used and transmuted to create deeper resilience. It's not always the case when you're just walking into situations. And if you've had a very traumatizing experience, you know what you need to avoid in order to stay safe. But I want to give people hope at the end of this if they've been through something really traumatic and it's running a lot of their identity and they find themselves looping over it all the time. And they know it's a very delicate situation. Maybe they have difficulty trusting people. Maybe they have difficulty opening up to practitioners.
So at first, within yourself, you have to understand that any sort of trauma response that you have, anything that you've gone through, your body, your mind, your soul has done the best it can to deal with it in the present moment. And maybe the best it can is to have those defense systems, those things activated.
Right.
And so first off, honoring yourself, honoring the own innate intelligence of your own body, the own innate intelligence of your soul, and knowing that first off, you can't rush your healing. So it will play out in its own time. And then secondly, that a lot of the times when it is your time, when you found the right container, when you've, you know, Bessel van der Kolk in Body Keeps the Score says, healing happens in the presence of an empathetic witness. We're not designed to do it alone.
Yes.
But we have to do it ourselves.
Yes.
So community is an essential nutrient to this piece. Finding people that resonate with you, finding people that are able to be that empathetic witness, that are not going to judge you for whatever came up, that sees you as an intelligent being. That's so essential. And then a lot of the times people find their deepest purpose where they've had the most pain.
Yeah.
Because the shit that we've gone through, the stuff we've overcome, that's where we can help others. And there's no such thing as self-help. Self-help is bullshit. We actually need each other. And so a lot of the times people find their purpose in the service of others, and that happens to be the places that we're wounded at. And we are all searching for, it's man's search for meaning, right?
Yeah.
All the time we find meaning in the service of others, and that comes from the places that we've been wounded. And being gentle with yourself. That's a term that's thrown around a lot. Being gentle to be gentle with yourself, to be gentle with your internal world is to be stern with the outside world.
Mm.
And so a lot of the times it's being able to claim your boundaries.
Yes.
And in this sort of work as a practitioner, like, you have to know what is self and what is other. And so sensitivity only becomes a weakness if you forgot what is self and what is other.
Mm-hmm. Weak boundaries.
And it's okay to, when I'm working with somebody, it's okay to let myself feel something, but I don't attach to it. It's moving through me. Anything that's coming up is coming up to move through me, and I'm not holding it.
Yeah. Beautiful. So in closing, I want to offer you the space to talk about your trainings. I know you have some coming up in the summer that people listening to this episode might be interested in. And you've so graciously offered a little discount, which we'll put in the show notes after for anyone who's interested in training with you. This is a very exciting opportunity. And so I'm sure there are people listening to this that were deeply resonating with your voice and your mission, and their own story was really blooming and blossoming within this. So will you talk a little bit about your offerings? Where are the best places for people to find you online, and anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, first off, thank you so much for having me on, Hallie. You're an incredible human, and I'm so thankful for you. Secondly, I run in-person trainings out of Austin and also Phoenix, Arizona. They are continuing education for people that are practitioners, that are working with people that want to learn somatic release breath work. We have all different types of practitioners come. We have, coaches, psychologists, doctors, people that work with mental health, people that work on a physical level as well too. We have physical therapists, chiropractors, body workers. It's a powerful modality that really allows you to work with not just the mind, not just the body, but the mind and the body. We also have an online training. It's a 12-week training that's coming up in the summer. It'll probably be in May. And so if you guys are interested, you can check out the link that she's going to have in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a discount code, or you can go ahead and check out somaticreleasebreathwork.com. And also you can connect with me. My Instagram is @Jaggers, JR, JAGGERS, JR. Or you can connect with us at Somatic Release on Instagram as well.
Beautiful. Stephen, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah.
This has been really illuminating and super special. Thank you for your offering this morning, and I'm very grateful.
I'm super grateful for you, Hallie. We'll have to do it again soon.
We will.
Yeah. Love you, girl.
Love you too.